Dang it, here we are. Very end of the semester. We got 1 week of classes left, and then your final paper is due the Sunday before finals week. So that would be Sunday, the 25th of April. And I'll get that in the Dropbox in the assignment box so that you'll see it hopefully then on your calendar. So I just want to give you some final instructions, some things to just try to tidy things up and make sure that everybody's on the same page and that everybody submits the best final project, final paper that they can. So let's take a look. And this is in the content section, so you guys can open this and look at it yourself, right? So I've given you feedback. Make sure you go back and look at the feedback that I've given you for your outline and your intro and conclusion. Unfortunately, for a lot of folks, the feedback I gave on the outline was that there just wasn't enough information, especially in the financial portion, for me to really give you great feedback. So, work hard. You need to open up, those financial statements in FINRA. Probably I recommend, and then find stuff and then go look it up in the annual reports, right? So you get comfortable understanding where the information is and what it says. And if you got problems, ask me. But asking me on Saturday morning or Sunday morning when your paper's due Sunday night probably isn't going to be any good. I'm quite sure I'll be out of town this Saturday and maybe Sunday too. So how long should it be? Spacing, I say 1 to 1.5 should be the spacing. I can't imagine you'd want to double space. Actually, 1 I don't really prefer. That gets kind of, for my old eyes, gets to be a little congested. Of course, I can always change that when I'm correcting it. But, if you do 1.15 to 1.5, probably in a good place, it should be no longer than 5 pages. But I can't imagine, you're gonna have a paragraph right for the intro, a paragraph for the conclusion, a paragraph for the history, for the industry, for the strategy. There's 5 paragraphs. That by itself should take a couple of pages, and then that should leave you 2 or 3 pages for your financial analysis. That's kind of, I think, what you ought to shoot for is in that area. So you should use and cite some sources, right? I'm not really too concerned about the format of the citations. So you can have a bibliography if you want, and that can be in addition to the 5 pages. That's fine. Or you can cite it right within the body. So you can cite the website, boom, paste that right into the body where that website is. That's fine. I don't have too many problems about that. So do no later than Sunday. Kind of got that. Remember the basics, right? In the introduction, you got to tell me what you plan to tell me. Summarize those points. That can be very basic, right? This paper is going to review the history, strategy, and industry of XYZ Corporation, and then I'm going to include a detailed financial analysis and make a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold. Okay. Then in the body, you tell me, right? You put that stuff in there. In the conclusion, you tell me what you told me. Again, you summarize it and you make that recommendation. So here's, how it should be set up, right? You should have the intro, I think. This is how I would set it up. I'd talk about the history. I'd talk about the industry in which it competes and the company's strategy. And then again, the detailed financial analysis, and I emphasize here, this should dominate your paper. And then the conclusion, right? And the concluding paragraph isn't just making the recommendation. It's also, again, a summarization of the topics, and maybe point out a few of the major reasons why you're making your recommendation. I put a few things in here that have happened in the past, and so I want people to avoid that. One is, don't simply recite facts and figures. So I'll get papers that they get to that financial part, and it's like a monotone. It's like the gross sales increased from 10 million 5 years ago to 12 million 4 years ago. The gross profit went from 10 years ago or 5 years ago and it's just on and on, and it just drones on and on. Okay, I'm interested in the numbers, and you got to put some numbers in there. I get that, but I'm more interested, what's the cause of the numbers? Why have revenues increased? And it could be that they've just increased steadily. Probably if you look at Walmart, well, break it down. Was it organic growth? Is it because of new sales, or because of new stores? Is it because they're expanding their geographic, maybe in other countries, right? And so, Walmart's probably boring in terms of the growth of their revenue, but there's reasons for that, and you need to kind of dig that up a little bit and explain it a little bit. Same with, is the gross profit expanding, or is it narrowing? Okay, or operating expenses, are they doing a good job of controlling operating expenses? How or why? Those are the kinds of answers that we got to look for. And did they take on a lot of debt? Geez, did they have an acquisition or a merger or something like that? Those get really interesting. So, okay, don't just copy and paste from the annual report. I've seen that. You know what, guys? I read a ton of annual reports, and so I go along and I'm reading stuff that you've written, and then all of a sudden I get 2 pages of stuff, and I start reading it, and I go, oh boy, this just sounds a whole lot like the annual report. Okay, and so I, sometimes I just copy and paste that right into a search engine, and it'll take me right to the annual report. Okay, so take some short quotes from there. There's no problem with that. Make sure you cite those. Okay, but for the most part, use your own words and whatnot, and go through it, find the answers, and then expand on that a little bit in your paper. Don't particularly want you using a lot of graphs or charts or tables. That's not to say, if you come up with one, or maybe 2, if you really think that they're absolutely wonderful and you want to use them in your paper, maybe, okay. But when I get like a 5-page paper, and 2 pages of it are filled with nothing but copied and pasted graphs, that's not going to cut it. Okay, that's not going to be the recipe for a good grade. So there's some basic instructions. I also want to take a look at the rubric. I think students fail to look at the rubric that I'm going to use, before they write this thing, to get an idea how it's going to break down. So here we go. Organization. First, it's got to have the intro and conclusion. And in that, you have to summarize, those major topics of the paper, or else I'm going to, give you a 2 or something, okay? Logical sequencing of topics. So make sure that you've got your topics in order, that you're not jumping around, okay? If you put the strategy before the industry, fine. That you don't have to put that absolutely in the order that I have it, but make sure that it's logical. Make sure that it's also in the order that you summarize it in your intro and conclusion. Smooth transition, right? Includes all the required elements. Bingo, that shouldn't be that difficult, right? You're going to talk about the history and the industry. Now, I've combined history and industry here. So you can see I give a little bit more credence to strategy. Okay, so I think a lot of students don't look at that, and what's the company's strategy? And sometimes that's just thoughtful on your part. Yeah, you're going to read a lot about the company, but, what's Walmart's strategy? Well, it's always the low price, right? So they're a low-cost provider, okay? Southwest Airlines, same thing. They're kind of a low-cost provider, right? Starbucks, they're not a low-cost provider. Okay, there's differentiation, right? They want you to have an experience when you go into one of their stores. I just gave it away. I think 1 or 2 of you actually picked Starbucks. I didn't mean to do that. Gave you a little head start there, right? Okay, so talk about their strategy a bit. Do some looking up for that. And then you can see 40% though is for the financial analysis. But that also says that you could do a great job of the financial analysis, and if you punt on the rest of this, you're still not going to get that great of a score. So do a good job on all of it, but you can see major financial data identified. Okay, so break it down, right? Can we break it down? Sometimes we'll do it. Some people might want to write this chronologically, and that's fine. So you may go through kind of things that happened in 2016, let's say. Then you may go through things that happened in 2017 from all the financial statements, right? So 2016, here's some information from the income statement, from the balance sheet, maybe the cash flow, maybe extra information. 2017, you may do it like that. You may also want to, some people may want to use subheadings as like a income statement. Well, here's what's happened over the last 5 years under the income statement. This is what we've done. Okay. Then we might look at the balance sheet. This is what's happened. Okay. And we might look at the cash flow, and you might look at some other, additional information, additional financial information, because there could be some stuff that's kind of doesn't, it could be equity, for example. Maybe they're buying back. Boy, that's a big deal. Warren Buffett talked a lot about that in his most recent annual report, is buying back stock. Companies may be doing that, and you should be looking for that, right? That'd be on the cash flow, and it'd also be kind of in the equity reconciliation that they do on the balance sheet. So, right, depth of ratio analysis. So you got to look at the ratio analysis. That's not just ROE and ROA. I'm probably a little bit more concerned about like the gross profit, operating expenses too. When in that FINRA where I can flip it back and forth between dollars and the percentages, those are ratios. And we're doing a ratio analysis, and we're doing operating expenses to sales, right? We're doing gross profit to sales. Okay, we're doing those types of things, and so ratio analysis is, you don't have to spend a whole ton of time talking about ROE, ROA, those types of things, although I expect you to look at those, but that also includes a lot of those other things on that income statement. Historical data logically presented. So that gets back to how do you want to present that, and I'm fine kind of either way. There may be other ways, but I think you ought to either maybe do it chronologically or by statement. Okay? And if you got a different idea, you may want to run it by me first. That's fine. And then the conclusion summarizes the findings within the financial data. So then I'm going to come and look at your conclusion about your recommendation and whatnot, I guess, and come back here and say, does that kind of match up? And then you have to write well. Yeah, that's basically what this last one is make sure you write well, make sure you use proper grammar, words, spelling, the paragraphs flow, the sentences flow. One thing that happens, I didn't see it too much in your guys' intros and conclusions and whatnot, but sometimes when folks write the papers, they get some long rambling sentences. When we write for business, we try to focus on, or try to keep your sentences short and sweet, short and concise. This term I kind of like to use, so do that. Remember that your company is an it. It's not a they, their, or them, or themselves. It's an it or itself. So keep that in mind as you're going through it. I know I made that correction on a lot of papers. So there's some basics, some basics for the final instructions. I sure hope it's helpful. And again, early this week, if you have some questions or concerns, please get those to me. Thanks, and good luck. I look forward to reading your final papers.